So, wir machen jetzt weiter mit dem Referenten Craig Rucker. Er ist aus den Staaten zu uns gekommen und Mitbegründer und Präsident des Committee for Constructive Tomorrow, auch bekannt als CFACT. Herr Thus hatte bereits angesprochen, dass wir eine sehr lange Beziehung mit CFACT bereits am Laufen haben. Die haben uns sehr lange schon sehr intensiv unterstützt. Das ist eine sehr schöne Symbiose, die wir da am Laufen haben. Er gilt in Washington DC als führender Vertreter der marktwirtschaftlichen Umweltbewegung und der Think Tank Community und hat auch bereits zahlreiche Publikationen verfasst. Ich entschuldige mich für meine doch versagende Stimme. Er ist ein häufiger Gast bereits in Radio-Talkshows gewesen und renommierten Medien wie Fox News, CNN, The Wall Street Journal. Außerdem ein Co-Produzent des preisgekrönten Films The Hustle, der 2016 an einem Abend die Nummer 1 an den amerikanischen Kinokassen wurde. Er ist als akkreditierter Beobachter bei den Vereinten Nationen dabei gewesen und hat dementsprechend auch CFACT-Delegationen zu rund 30 großen UN-Konferenzen geführt, darunter auch die jüngsten in Sharm el-Sheikh, Ägypten und Dubai. Ich heiße euch herzlich willkommen, Craig Rucker, mit seinem Vortrag zu den Grünen und Linken, wie wir sie in die Schranken verweisen können und wie wir dabei gewinnen werden. Herzlichen Dank.
Well, thank you very much for that warm introduction. As was said, my name is Craig Rucker. I serve as the president of the Washington, D.C.-based Committee for a Constructive Tomorrow, or CFACT for short. Let me say it's back at you. Wolfgang, Holger, the good folks of EIKE, we are very blessed to have your acquaintance and thank you and count you as very good friends in this fight to try and bring climate realism to Europe. I'm just curious. I will try to speak slowly for the translation. Please forgive me if I do talk too fast. Hopefully the translators will. As is often the case when they have the old saying, if you speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. But if you speak 1 language, you're American, right? So that is the case here. So I will try to speak slowly. Now, CFACT, and I often get this difficulty in that when I give a presentation, my staff says, Craig, you've just given a great presentation, but you've said nothing about your organization. So I will try to do a little shameless self-promotion at the beginning so you know who I am, and then get into the presentation. CFACT has been around since 1985. We've been called and dubbed by the Boston Globe as the Greenpeace of the right. And the reason that they call us that is, yes, like Greenpeace, we do studies, we testify before governmental bodies, we go to UN climate summits and the like, but we have a lot of fun doing it. We often do things like stunts or pranks. And sometimes for certain people, they say that that's a little bit out there, that we do these types of things. But all organizations take after their founder. And I myself am one of the ones who founded CFACT back in the mid-'80s. This was my organization that I started in high school. It was called the Fighting Army of Radical Teenagers. Fighting Army of Radical Teenagers, or FART for short. That's a group of us after we did a raid. We used to go and put a list of demands on the school and say, if you do not meet our demands by noon, we will strike. And one of our demands might be that the Beatles have a reunion or something outrageous. And if they didn't do it, we would go into a classroom and we would liberate the students from their teachers. We would escort the teachers, and then the students would run out of the classroom. Some teachers had a sense of humor, and they played up with the game. It was kind of a prank. It was done harmlessly. But you could not dress like this. We look like terrorists right now. This is the 1970s, but everybody took it as a joke. But some did not. Some chased us. In fact, we got chased by the principal, but we had a plan, just like we do at CFACT, where we'd run out of the school, our girlfriends would be ready with their cars, we'd jump in and drive off. And this was done right after we drove off. And this person right here, which one is me? That one is me. I was a ringleader. Well, this is a good thing. My parents said, Craig, you're a prankster, you're a jokester. I did this. This is just one of many things in high school. But they were a little worried about me, wondering what I'd do for a career. I mean, we have talented people here in science, Will Happer, Willie Soon, others. We got good spokesmen or policy experts, lawyers. What are you going to do with this as a career? Well, I took it and formed an organization where I did this all over the world, where I organized protests or did stunts flying into UN conferences or go boarding Greenpeace ships and dropping banners off of it. All sorts of pranks and punks against Al Gore and other things, covering media and hopefully doing something positive. Now, I know sometimes when I first met Holger and Wolfgang, they always said, these are good, Craig, but are you really accomplishing anything? And I thought I would use that as a way to introduce my topic here and ask, where am I going? What am I doing? What's the meaning of life? Is there a point to all this stunt work? How are we as climate realists doing against the other side, which we think is not giving us the straight scoop on global warming? And I would like to say here and now, I think we've been doing fairly good. If this were the battle, we would not be the big guy. We would be the little guy. Let's face it, we have a lot of odds stacked against us. If you were to look at what the climate alarmists have, they have the major scientific bodies, they have Hollywood, they have the United Nations, they have all the money, the major financial institutions. What do we have? One good thing we have some very bright scientists here today. Clauser, Nobel Prize, we got Will Happer, Willie Soon, and others. We have a few good blog writers, people like Steve Malloy back in the United States, and others, Tony Heller, who are getting the message out when they're not getting banned on social media. We have some NGOs, Heartland Institute, the Competitive Enterprise Institute, others in Washington, but these are fairly modest organizations compared to the other side. So we have our work cut out for us. But you want to know what? I'm happy to report that I think, in balance, while we haven't been able to stop those in the climate movement, we've been able to stymie them. I'm going to give you a couple 6-point. I'm in a unique position because I was around at the start of the climate debate. And I know for many of you in Europe, and I've seen it in the United States perspective, you say, how is it that the United States has always been the stick in the mud? When the Kyoto Protocol came, we didn't sign. How did that happen? How did we not join the Paris Accord? Well, we did, then we didn't. Now we're back in, but we may well be out again. How is the United States dragging their heels when every other Western economy is not doing that? Well, I'd say it's not by accident. It's by hard work and by vigilance on our side. And I think the same is possible here in Europe, and we got some optimism with what's going on. So first thing I want to say is, how are we faring? I want to take kind of a macro look. There's a short-term and a long-term way of looking at this issue. The short-term way is by politics. If you have our position, it's not going to hurt you politically. This gentleman, despite, if he can stay out of jail, may well be the next president of the United States, and he's the one who got us out of the Paris Climate Accord. And he's poised to get back in. In Europe, we see all sorts of things with these farmer protests in France, Netherlands, with Wilder and that new coalition going in the Netherlands, the latest elections in Germany where the Greens took a beating. Short term, we're doing pretty good. I know you Europeans have been upset about climate policies for a bit. This was me back during the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protests back in France. Of course, as a troublemaker, I couldn't resist but joining that when I was driving through France. This is actually a picture I shot of us getting tear gassed. So that was like great fun. Some people like to see the Brandenburg Gate and the Eiffel Tower. I like getting gassed with the Gilets jaunes. And of course, the elections. And it's not just in the United States and in Europe, but around the world. Sri Lanka ran their government out based on taking away fertilizers. Canada, Trudeau's parties, now getting in, half the wing of it is going away from this whole idea of limiting fossil fuels. And in New Zealand, they're now opening areas for gas leasing. So we're seeing around the world, on the short term, we made some progress. But long term, The important thing is for our climate realist movement is public opinion. Do people actually agree with us? Well, the left would like to say, nobody agrees with us. And they'll put out reports like this one, which says Americans who think global warming is happening outnumber those who think it's not happening by a 5-to-1 ratio. They do that to depress us. And you go, oh man, we've been working hard. That really rots. How are we going to be able to ever win? It's all futile. But if you look in this same poll, you'll see that it's not quite. Oh, by the way, it's 7% in Europe. So you guys got a little more work. In China, it's 3%. And I think after this poll, that 3% were arrested. So it's probably 100% in China that now believe in climate change. But if you look at this poll inside, there's your 14%. But what they don't tell you is that 26% don't buy that man is the major cause. They think it's due to natural conditions. 14% are unsure. Now remember how weighted this is. The other side has all of the media, all of the UN. And yet, as I add this up, and math wasn't my thing, doing pranks was, we actually outnumber them in terms of that by like 54 to 46% when you add up those three. And you'll see that people that care about this or be a top priority outnumber those who think it is a top priority. So despite all their efforts, and it hasn't changed much through the years, going back from 2016 to present, it's roughly the same. And another evidence that we're making progress is the other side is very upset that a few skeptics have been able to muck up the game, which is why they're trying to silence us on social media and the like. I'm going to give you a couple case studies because I was there and present during these to lead you and to show you how we succeeded in the United States to be such a stick in the mud, a thorn in the side of the other side. So I'll take you back to the beginning because I was there. Even before this Rio Earth Summit in 1988, there was a gentleman named James Hansen who kind of introduced the global warming issue to the American public in 1988. He was in the Senate testifying that he was 95% sure that humanity was headed toward a global warming crisis. Now that was news to me. I was raised in a place called Buffalo, New York. Now I don't know if you know geography in America very much, but if Spain is like our Florida, Buffalo would be like Finland or Russia. I was in a very cold area of America. And what we had heard up until this point was not global warming in 1988, it was the impending ice age. Being from Buffalo, I kind of believe that. We got a lot of snow all the time and got buried in it frequently. But all of a sudden, 1988, the discussion turned to climate change. And what I found remarkable about this is that between 1988 and 1992, this issue went from one nobody had heard about to they're holding a global conference in Rio de Janeiro to sign binding treaties that would change all economic activity to address an issue nobody had even heretofore knew about. That's crazy. Well, I was suspicious of it. The other big organization at this time that I remember, there weren't very many of us that grabbed onto this, was the Competitive Enterprise Institute, and a gentleman named Fred Smith at the time. And a couple authors. One was Dixie Lee Ray. She's a former governor of the state of Washington, and she wrote a book called Trashing the Planet. So there were a few people that were starting in America to draw questions about this and alarm about what was going on. And we thought the U.S. should stay out of this whole negotiation. Let's take a look at it and everything. But we had a president at that time that was in Rio named George H. Bush, who was in an election struggle with Bill Clinton. Many of you may remember Bill Clinton, George Bush, right? Well, they were at it. George Bush wanted to be the environmental president. He thought that would help him defeat Bill Clinton. So he was going to go to this conference in Rio, but before he went, he wanted to bring in those who were conservative to back him up. I was one of those who was invited to go see him, along with Fred Smith, Morton Blackwell, a number of others. We're ready to go and advise him to not go to this conference. Nothing good will happen from it. When we got disinvited at the last minute, he decided he would go. Now his spokesman came to us and say, don't worry about it though. President's not going to do anything. Remember, it's election year. We're going to sign 9 non-binding. That means it's not going to be binding. We'll just sign some documents, pull back, and it'll be good show. We went, yeah, it'll be non-binding for now. Give it a few years, they'll make it binding if we get another administration. You shouldn't do this. But he went. We were concerned. So we wanted to make sure the American public knew what was going on down there. So we financed, and CFACT was the one who did it initially, but Competitive Enterprise Institute went down there too. This woman, Dixie Lee Ray, to go down to Rio de Janeiro and monitor things and report back, but not just report back through the CFACT channels, but through this guy. Does anybody recognize this person? Rush Limbaugh. He's a big radio host in America. Was, yes, he's passed away now. Anyway, at that time, he was in his kind of zenith. 20 million Americans heard him each day. And that was a good way to get information out. He invited her to give updates every day during this 2-week Rio summit on what was going on down there. So we reach millions. My broad point is this. It wasn't by accident that people became skeptical. Right from the beginning, day one, we wanted to make sure people knew about it. And that played a role in it. And she was very instrumental in that, as was Rush Limbaugh. So we made sure of it. Now, there's 3 things that came out of this climate conference, and we did a good job of taking them on, again, by quick action. The first one I want to talk about is Agenda 21. These were the 3 documents: Agenda 21, Convention on Biological Diversity, and the Framework on Climate Change. Has anybody heard of Agenda 21 out of curiosity? You've all heard about it. You're all conspiracy nuts. There is no such thing. Anyway, Agenda 21 was a real document. It was signed by a lot of nations, including our president, George H. Bush. And essentially what the objective of this is to put in sustainability goals in the local communities. Now, to do that, they partner with an organization called ICLEI, the International Conference on Local Environmental Initiatives. This is from their website right now. Now, ICLEI was tasked with going into the different communities, and what they actually do is extract dollars from them in order to put in climate change initiatives and things of that sort in the localities. They are actually trained not to mention that they're working for with the UN on these things too, and I'll get to why I know that. Now, to counter this, we worked with some grassroots people. This was an early meeting in the early 90s, and this gentleman, Henry Lamb, he's no longer with us, but we formed something instead of Agenda 21, we called it Freedom 21. And we started working with cattlemen, ranchers, property owners, and took them on in the local grassroots community. We sent this gentleman, who now works with me at CFACT, Tom DeWeese, to hundreds of communities across the country, testifying in legislatures and everything. ICLEI had penetrated about 600. They bragged. 600 communities now are part of our ICLEI system to put in climate change stuff. By the time we got done with them and alerted them, they were less than half that, more like 200. We couldn't get them out of the blue communities. What I mean by that are the very liberal communities like San Francisco. But they were gutted pretty much everywhere else because we took quick action on the grassroots level. And the media, of course, hit back. New York Times say activists fight green projects seeing a UN plot. They belittled our idea, said there's no such thing as Agenda 21. It's all, myth. You can see this on the internet. The UN brags about, they now call it Agenda 2030. And I know it exists because here I am attending an ICLEI meeting where they were, and this is in Belo Horizonte, Brazil. I was there, and I met the people, and they were thinking, this is my prankster part of me coming in. I would go in pretending I was with them and got to know them. And they would confide in me and tell me that eventually they caught on to me and threw me out. But they would tell me that they were very upset about the grassroots activism that was going on in the U.S., hurting their cause. So we've hurt them there. Biodiversity was the second one. This same cast of characters fighting it. We were able to intercept some information. Basically, the biodiversity folks wanted to take 1/3 of America and turn it into a national park. All this red that you see in this particular map was what the UN had planned to turn into a natural park in America. we got this map. We had some stakeholders that took place. We gave it to these two officials who were Kay Bailey Hutchinson and Bob Dole. They carted that very map out onto the floor, and the biodiversity treaty was killed. We had 3 of them. We're 2-0. Now we just have 1 left. The Convention on Biodiversity. Right? Now, this was voluntary under Bush, but a few years later, as predicted, the Greens wanted to make it into the Kyoto Protocol. Political circumstances change. We now have Bill Clinton as president. He loves the Kyoto Protocol. He wants to see this become law. What do you do now? Do you just give up, wait for the next election, hope your party wins, and then stop it? No, we did not. Actually, we decided we would go to Kyoto and take action. Go. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's me with Buddha. He was one of the ones that we started with. But one of the things we put together was something called the Byrd-Hagel Resolution, and this was signed by Democrats and Republicans. I was talking with Ben Zeiker trying to figure out who it was on our side that came up with this creation. But before the Clinton administration even went to Kyoto, we said, you cannot sign anything, Clinton administration, that's going to hurt the U.S. economy, or that developing countries shouldn't cut their emissions just like we do. Well, given that, deflated the whole Kyoto process, and they weren't able to get anything passed, and Clinton didn't even put the Kyoto Protocol. So if you want to know why the U.S. drags its heels and why we were one of the ones not doing it, it's this resolution right here that was put forward. I believe it was by Myron Ebell, who was the genesis of this one, but I'll confirm that. But it was our coalition that worked to do that. Nevertheless, we wanted to go to Kyoto. We did go to Kyoto. We engaged. One of the things that frustrated us is that the science wasn't being discussed. They were talking economic policy, said even back in 1997, they said the science is conclusive, global warming is done. So we decided we would say, no, it's not. We know of very good scientists, many are in this room, who disagree with that. How are we going to get the world media to pay attention to the science? My prankster stuff came through. We staged a stunt in the middle of the conference where we've had this burning ball of incense. We called it the Scorched Earth Award. And we had this thing, don't fry our economy over the myth of global warming hype. So we put that in there, and the media showed up in droves. We gave that award to Greenpeace and the World Wildlife Fund. They actually showed up because they saw all the media we had. It was almost like a Beatles concert. And Fred Smith wisely said right in front of the cameras, we challenge you to a debate on the science. And that led to this particular conference. Right afterwards, in Kyoto, ABC, NBC, NPR, we got the science debated, even in 97, to some degree. Ultimately, Clinton did not put that treaty forward, and then Bush came in, and he did not sign it. We won. We killed the Kyoto Protocol. That's how that happened. This man, Al Gore, was another problem. After losing to George W. Bush, the Greens tried to prop him up. He became Mr. Global Warming. Did this movie, An Inconvenient Truth. He won the Nobel Prize, and was actually, his movie's being shown even to this day in high schools, propagandizing people despite its factual inconsistencies. We thought he was a problem. We wanted to do something to address this so that the media couldn't say he's Mr. Awesome and everything. So we took that on. One of the first things we did is take him on right after he won his Nobel Prize. He won it in Helsinki, and his immediate thing he had to do after getting that prize was to fly to a climate change conference in Bali, Indonesia. There waiting for him, we had activists working with Joanne Nova, Lord Christopher Monckton, and others. We greeted him as he went in to... It's a little much of a story, and we don't have time for it, but we actually got right in front of them, robbed all the media attention, and got a lot of hits off the fact that protesters were there when he received his award. We followed that up in America he did a victory lap tour of getting that in places like Miami, Chattanooga, Madison, Portland. We sent people ahead because he had broadcast what his schedule would be, and so in advance, we had people planned, mostly our college students and others, to do protests. Here's one in Miami from back in that time. You'll see that we did. And our protests actually got more press than his speech about climate. to the point that he canceled his tour. So that was impactful. Still not over, though. He was a problem. His movie was a problem. We worked with Fella McAleer and Anne McElhaney, produced this movie, Not Evil, Just Wrong, and motivated, by this time, it was a couple years later, Obama had been elected, the Tea Party movement. I don't know if you've heard of that in America, but it was a reaction to a lot of what Obama did. And everywhere that Gore went, we mobilized the Tea Party to protest him and his movie. It finally got to the point that we were successful. And you would see headlines like this: "The other inconvenient truth, millennials won't listen to Gore. Is Al Gore now a help or hindrance to the global warming cause?" Success. We were able to blunt that threat. We did the same in the Copenhagen Climate Agreement. By this time, the Greens wanted to get another treaty. Kyoto was expiring. We went to, one of the people in this room will be one of the next speakers. I don't know if he's right after me or not, is Mark Morano. Had a lot to do with this. He was in a car in California, Hollywood, when he heard about the leaked emails that came out. First off, are you all familiar with ClimateGate? You'd understand what that is, right? Okay, good. So he's in the back of a car in Hollywood, California, gets this, and maybe he could tell the story better, but he starts telling Rush Limbaugh, starts telling Fox News, starts telling everybody, that it becomes blown up as a major thing, this ClimateGate issue. New York Times is very upset because there's a climate meeting coming up. They do a feature story on him. The Center on Warming expands his campaign against the others. The climate conference happens. We hold a conference before that, and New York Times again covers it, and we're showcasing all sorts of things. We brought a whole bunch of scientists against them. At the end of the day, ClimateGate became such a big thing that it derailed pretty much the entire Copenhagen consensus, and we avoided getting Kyoto done. Oh, for fun, we boarded some Greenpeace ships too and dropped banners off them there. That's the prank. We can't leave without doing a prank against them. At the end of the day, low targets, goals drop, Copenhagen ends in failure. And if you read further in this article, you'll see that one of the big reasons had to do with ClimateGate. And because of Mark Morano being very instrumental. He wasn't alone. There were many others, probably some in this room, that helped with getting that out. But he was instrumental in doing that. Another victory. International Climate Court. Has anybody ever heard of an International Climate Court? That's good. You would have if we hadn't intervened on our side with some of the people in this room. This goes back to Durban, South Africa. UN floats global climate court to enforce emissions rules. That concerned us. We figured that we better do something about that to stop that, because just picture you have an international court there punishing nations for not keeping climate change. So by this time we had made a little bit of an inroad. The UK Guardian said the denialists, they started calling us denialists at this time, have not yet been seen in COP17, but the formidable team of Lord Christopher Monckton, Mark Morano, Kelvin Kem, Leon Lowe, and Craig Rucker from CFACT, Committee for Constructive, are threatening to turn up. So they were looking for us to come in there. And we came in very differently this time. We parachuted in. I tried before I came there, and I have it someplace, but I can't find it. The front page of the Durban paper had pictures of this whole stunt there, and it talks about ClimateGate 2. We came in talking ClimateGate 2, but we wanted to derail this whole issue of a World Climate Court. It wasn't until the last night that the Greens snuck it in the text, discovered by Lord Christopher Monckton, and again, Mark Morano getting it out on Fox News. Here's some of the articles. Oh, we did a press conference with Senator Inhofe, but he got it out in several different publications, made a big deal about it, and the Greens withdrew that text. Now, am I saying we did it? No, but I think we embarrassed them by getting the text out there because they wanted to sneak it in as some little subtext, but they weren't able to do it. Good work by Christopher Monckton and others to get this out there for the public. Another victory. Now, I could go on and on with the war stories. In Warsaw, Poland, there were some rollbacks by them. We got to use their Independence Day to speak to 50,000 Poles. All their channels covered that. Lima, Peru, We worked to get some Greenpeace people arrested. They had desecrated the Nazca lines. We exposed that at a press conference and through a video. The Peruvian government got upset with the Greenpeace people, and they got jailed. Bottom line is, I'd say the important thing is be aggressive, and despite your little numbers, if you just get the information out there and have fun, you can make an impact. Today we're continuing, and we are having fun again. One of the issues we're doing is taking on offshore wind farms, renewable energy projects, and others. These are opportunities to show the Greens don't care about the environment. This is us putting up just last year, Save the Whales, Stop Windmills, and flying a banner over Atlantic City. That was covered in the New York Post. This was I organized. We got citizens to form a big whale tail, and they lit it up. It's a cool thing on New Jersey. And also we did a boat protest 25 miles out into the ocean with bullhorns. I wanted to get Patrick Moore to come with me, but he was this close but didn't do it. And this was on Fox News. We also, and you say, well, what's the whole deal with all these protests? Have they done anything tangible? I would say they help contribute to the demise of many of these wind farm projects that we're seeing in the United States. President Biden has this plan to put wind farms all the way from the Carolinas up to New England, and wants to do this by 2030. He wants to put in 30,000 megawatts. I think we've stopped over 2/3 of them from going up by these types of protests against them for whales. You have, Avangrid, Empire Wind 2, Ørsted, all these companies pulled out. They even paid millions of dollars not to put in these projects. And best of all, we're scaring them even more because so much of a backlash have we created that now Donald Trump's pledges on day one, he's going to scrap offshore wind projects. I'm sure that doesn't help their investment very much. Wall Street, we've taken on the Greens and the whole ESG issue. And one of the things we've done, as well as a lot of other companies, we bought lots of shares of different big companies, BlackRock, State Street, JP Morgan. And we show up at these board meetings and we ask difficult questions and propose resolutions that are against what the Greens are talking about. We've been very impactful on that. In fact, they changed the rules. It used to be you could buy a couple $1,000s worth of shares and get in. Now you need like 10 or 20,000. But Lord has blessed us, and we've been able to do that. In fact, the Wall Street Journal just this last week ran an article about how impactful it has been from the conservative side to go into these shareholder meetings and change things. And it certainly has inspired GOP officials who in several states now have withdrawn their funds, their retirement pension funds, from BlackRock and others for trying to push climate alarmism. And you see BlackRock backs off ESG. JP Morgan leaves a climate investor group. These are victories, just like that. They're continuing. We got now a good decision, and maybe I'm going to guess that maybe some others might be speaking on with the states taking it to the EPA and the courts. For time, I won't go into that. We have 19 state attorneys generals challenging blue states' radical climate policies impacting others. It used to be that we would just use our red states to blunt and stop them from occurring there. Now we're actually attacking the blue states, saying your climate policies are impacting us, we're taking you to court. And we're seeing them on retreat. So we're actually using where we are strong to go after where they exist. And I want to point out the good work of James Taylor at the Heartland Institute, another guy, Jason Isaac from the Texas Public Policy Foundations, as two champions. James is going to be talking right after me. Heroic in going into the various states, pushing various laws, working through a group called ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. In fact, James and I will be there in just next month, putting in what we call model bills that'll go out to all the states to stop climate and alarm policy and global warming extremism. And we've had extreme success at that. This gentleman, Frank Lass, and I together have written bills, and we tried to make them clever, like this one here about electric vehicle forced labor. We tried to put the Democrats on the defensive. That bill says that no parts can be used in electric vehicle that use child or slave labor. We've got it in all these parts. What that basically means is you can't make an electric vehicle, right? And there's a beauty in that bill because we just had it in Arizona, and though I have it down there, that Arizona did not actually pass because the governor just vetoed it. But that's good. It's a Democratic governor. We now have the Democratic governor of the state of Arizona saying, I support child labor and slave labor to make electric vehicles. Good. Now we have an election coming up. Let's use that as a platform. But that would be the type of thing that we do. Okay, I've talked, and I think I'm up on my time, so I will conclude my talk right here. And I don't know if I have time for one question or two, but I'll leave it up to my lovely and gracious host, S, as to whether we can do that.